Here it is, another episode of Ask the Lawyer, and this time we're going to ask the lawyer about what you should do if you're involved in an accident with a truck. I'm Rob Rosenthal with AskTheLawyers.com, and my guest today is attorney Greg Herrman of the Corpus Christi-based Herrman Herrman. Greg, thank you for making some time for us today. I appreciate it.
Sure, thank you. Glad to be here.
Let's start. So in Texas, there are a lot of trucks on the road. I know I see them every day as I'm headed to work. Guessing we have more than our share of truck accidents. Is that correct?
I think that's the case. I think Texas leads the nation in truck accidents.
No kidding. So in your experience, what are some of the more common causes of these accidents?
A lot of it's driver fatigue. And there's also drivers that are drinking, drivers on alcohol. They're speeding. And then there's stuff like brake failure and other mechanical issues that somebody, didn't address. But it's generally something like fatigue with the driver who, because a lot of them, they get paid by the load, not by the hour. And so the quicker they get it delivered, the more money they make. And so a lot of them violate the DOT regulations on how many hours they're supposed to drive. And, and also inattention. Sometimes there's drivers texting and driving, talking on the phone and driving. But those are probably the most common ones.
So when a truck accident happens, is it cut and dry who's responsible, or can it be, is it always the driver, or could it be the trucking company, maybe some third party that did repairs, or any or all of the above? What is the story there?
Yeah, well, of course, it's all based on facts. And, first of all, I assume you mean if it's all the truck driver's fault, because, it could be the other driver's fault, some. And so that would be contributory negligence. Like, let's say my client got hit by a truck and the jury came back and said he was 10% at fault or 15% at fault, then that amount of his damages would be subtracted. So let's say they awarded him $1 million, but they found him 20% at fault. Well, he'd only get 800,000. Mm-hmm. So that's the first issue is, and in Texas, some states, it's a pure comparative fault state, meaning that my client could be 90% at fault, but he'd still recover 10% of his damages. So if the jury said, okay, it's worth $1 million, but you're 90% at fault, you still get $100,000. And that's the way it really ought to work, to be fair. But in Texas, it doesn't work that way. We have a comparative fault system to a point. And then it's called contributory negligence if you're more than 50% at fault. So if it comes back and my client's 51% at fault, then guess what? He gets zero. Doesn't get a penny. So now that doesn't seem fair, but that's the way the law works. So that's the first question: is whose fault between the driver and the truck driver and the people they run into. But then, as far as the driver goes, the driver's almost always at fault. He can't really blame it on the company, especially if it's stuff that he did. Like, let's say he was speeding, or he was on drugs, or he was on his phone texting, or he failed to keep a proper lookout, or he failed to keep a proper distance. So the driver's almost always going to be at fault. Now, most of the time, he's covered by the insurance policy of the trucking company, so it doesn't really matter. Hopefully, he's got his own policy, and you can get that too. But invariably, the driver's gonna, I don't think I've seen a case where the driver was not at fault, but the company was, because even if the company failed to fix certain things, let's say the brakes, the driver still has a duty under the DOT regulations to check the truck before it leaves, make sure the brakes are working, make sure the signal lights are working, make sure, it's sound mechanically. So the driver's going to always be partly at fault, but the way it's presented to the jury is, okay, is the plaintiff at fault? If so, how much? Or negligent, and if so, how much? Is the truck driver negligent, and if so, how much? And then the trucking company. So if the trucking company did something else, like they didn't train the guy properly, or like we talked about earlier, he reported his brakes weren't working well and they failed to fix that, or they failed to fix any other mechanical issue, There's lots of ways that the trucking company can be at fault too. Yeah. Also, if they ratify certain conduct, for instance, a truck driver could do something that seems like, it shouldn't be okay, and it would be not in the course and scope of business and the course and scope of his employment. But if the company later comes along and ratifies it, meaning, they don't discipline them or they don't do anything, they don't even give them a slap on the wrist, then that's called ratification, which basically means they're saying that's okay to do that. So they can be held at fault for ratification too of the actions of the driver.
Gotcha. Now, let's say someone is in an accident with an 18-wheeler. Greg, what do you recommend they do, especially the first few steps? What should they do? Is it exactly the same as if you're in a 2-automobile accident, or are there some differences to it?
Well, yeah, kind of like a car accident. I mean, the first thing you want to do is, assuming you're okay and you're not in an ambulance being taken to the hospital and you can walk and everything, sure. I mean, you want to take photos of the scene, take photos of the other driver, take photos of skid marks, talk to any witnesses, talk to the other driver, the driver of the truck, make sure he's not intoxicated or impaired. If you can, look inside his cab to, make sure there's no, say, he's not in the middle of texting somebody. There's not any beer cans or, any other drug paraphernalia in there. So all that stuff's kind of the same. But what's really important is he probably won't let you see his cell phone. And most of these guys have 3 cell phones. They've got their company issued cell phone, then they've got their personal cell phone, then they've got a burner phone that they destroy in accidents where it's their fault and if they're texting and driving. So, keep an eye out before the cops get there for him trying to dispose of that burner phone is one thing I'd do. They also have a driver's log. Most of them do that now on their cell phone. They've got a app they use. If you can, make sure he doesn't destroy that or throw that away, because that's very important. But look inside the cab again if you can. See if there's any kind of GPS system or any other electronic stuff that would keep track of him, because companies these days generally know how fast the driver's driving, when he stopped last, when he got fuel, when he was supposed to take his breaks. A lot of companies let him violate that. But anyway, later on, they may say, oh, we don't have GPS, or oh, we don't have a camera next to the cab, or we don't have a camera next to the trailer. Well, if you got a picture of it and they try to later say we don't have that, then they're lying. And believe it or not, people lie. Especially companies and insurance companies, even worse. But there's other important things that, of course, you won't be able to do then. But this is why you either need to hire your own expert very quickly or hire a lawyer. Is you're going to want to download their black box, just like an airplane has a black box that tells you speed and when brakes were applied. Speed and when brakes were applied and everything else, all the other actions and any mechanical things, just like airplanes have those. The truck has those too. Right. And so the only way you're going to know those is by downloading the black box.
It already sounds to me, Greg, like a lot of the things you're saying, chances are average Joe Q public is not going to either know to do that, know how to do that, or it sounds like it's really important that you get an attorney who knows how to protect that evidence and knows how to get a hold of the black box and all that sort of stuff. And early on, yes?
Yes, early on. By the way, we do have a spoliation letter on our website. You can go download it, send to the trucking company that tells them they need to preserve all this stuff. Of course, a lot of them, especially if it's not coming from a lawyer, they're just going to ignore it. And what the lawyer can do is say, listen, if you don't sign this right now and agree to hold all these things and preserve all this evidence, we're going to file a TRO against you, and this truck isn't moving, and no freight's moving, nothing's going to happen. We're going to shut this thing down. So most of them will agree, but if they won't, you need to go to the courthouse, get a hold of a judge, and get them to sign a temporary restraining order so they don't move that truck.
Seems to me another difference between a two-car wreck would be if you're on the fence about, I'm not sure whether I need to contact an attorney in an accident with 18-wheeler, you can be pretty sure that driver's already on the phone with the attorney or is on the phone with somebody from corporate who's on the phone with the attorney already, correct?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. They'll probably have their corporate attorney on there, or one of the associate attorneys that works for the corporation, or works for the law firm that they always use, and the insurance company. And the insurance adjuster's already on his way out there, and he's not out there to find evidence of the fault of the truck driver. He's out there to find evidence of your fault, and he's out there to find evidence that it's not the truck driver's fault. So they have an expert on the way already. And by the way, a lot of them tell their truck driver, don't tell anybody anything, even the cop or the DPS. When they show up, don't tell them anything. Give me your driver's license and your insurance card and just shut your mouth. So yeah, they've got their lawyers on board, they've got their investigators on board, and the investigators are already heading that way. So yeah, you kind of already have the deck stacked against you.
Right. And it would seem to me you started off by saying if you're not seriously injured, you're not in an ambulance on the way to the hospital. But if you are, then you haven't had a chance to take a bunch of pictures and do your own little bit of investigative work. It would seem to me that's, if you're a relative or a loved one of someone who was seriously injured, that's even more important that you get an expert such as yourself already as soon as possible on the case.
Right, exactly right. And here's another thing that may sound small, but it's huge. It's called the point of impact. And what happens is when two vehicles hit each other, there's always debris, and the debris drops straight down. And a lot of times there's gouge marks and things like that, and what they call yaw marks, which is the way tires when you're braking, especially sideways, the yaw marks are the marks that are left on the pavement. Those things wash away. The DPS comes out there and sweeps up because they don't want a bunch of debris in the middle of the road. Those things disappear, and sometimes that is crucial. Like a perfect example is, let's say there's two cars coming right at each other on a 2-lane road, and they hit each other. The real question is whose lane did it occur in? Did it occur in the lane of the trucking company, or did it occur in the lane of the plaintiff? And one way you know that is you look for the point of impact and where the debris is, and the gouge marks and the yaw marks. And again, the insurance adjuster is not, if the evidence is not favorable to him, he's not going to take any pictures of that. He's not going to preserve that. He'll only do that if it's favorable to him. So yeah, that's why if you're on the way to the hospital and you can talk, tell your family, your loved ones, whoever, hey, get a lawyer and get out here and get some investigators out here, to preserve this evidence.
All right, Greg, super helpful information as usual. I appreciate all your time today, and thanks for answering our questions.
Sure, thank you.
That's going to do it for this episode of Ask the Lawyer. My guest has been attorney Greg Herrman of Herrman Herrman in Corpus Christi. If you want the best information about truck accidents, or you're ready to choose a lawyer that lawyers choose, make sure to visit askthelawyer.com. Also, please take a sec and subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking on the button at the bottom of the screen. Thanks for watching. I'm Rob Rosenthal with AskTheLawyers.com.